grabs. It's up for grabs. Civilization's up for grabs. I think everybody knows it.
In the summer of 1967, the world was suddenly turned inside out and upside down. In just a few years, parts of society had shifted from a structured traditional existence to a world on the brink. But on the brink of what? The adults of the 1950s had endured an economic depression and world war. Now at last they were living in prosperity, eager to pass along an easier way of life they had fought so hard to achieve. But little did they know that their life of abundance would be rejected by their very own children. While the baby boomers came of age in the most prosperous era in American history, they were also under the shadow of the nuclear arms race, which fueled a constant anxiety about the end of the world. As they practiced duck and cover drills at school, many were discovering marijuana, a gateway to new ideas and a community they could call their own. Some would later argue that duck and cover drills would go on to fuel anti-war and anti-nuclear activism that left those coming of age to wonder if there would even be a tomorrow. Perhaps it's no surprise that in the midst of this uncertainty, even novelty songs like Snoopy vs. the Red Baron reflect the era's focus on war.
80 men tried, 80 men died, now they're buried together on the countryside.
This collision of existential fear and a hunger for something deeper led them to question the script provided, asking, is material affluence what life is all about, or is there something more? It was a question that would echo for decades, one still being asked today, as relevant now as it was then. They were on the brink of creating a new society altogether, a better world than the one their parents handed them. In that climate of questioning, music began to reflect the ideas of a more spiritual, communal, and liberated future beyond the confines of suburbia.
Chasing after money and dreams that can't come true. I'm glad that we are different.
Their discovery of new ideas, along with the belief they could bring about change, would take them from Kerouac's Beat generation to Timothy Leary's hippies. While the previous generation's purpose had been clear and immediate, don't get killed in war and find food so you're not hungry, this generation began voicing the same questions they'd once wondered as children. Why can't things be free? Why is there war? Why can't everyone be free? The mix of prosperity and existential anxiety provided a volatile catalyst, stirring a generation without an immediate purpose for survival, but driven by a belief in a better way of life. And with the resources to organize a movement, all while being inspired by the hopefulness of the music on the radio. Songs like Happy Together captured the era's yearning for simple joys and the feeling of optimism. Juxtapose that with the shadow of the Vietnam War looming large, an ever-present threat that could upend their lives at any moment. The draft wasn't just a distant policy, it was a real possibility that they could be sent halfway across the world to fight in a conflict many didn't understand. It was as if their childhood atomic bomb fears were manifesting into real-life war. This threat began driving young people to protest, especially when their own peers were coming home in body bags. Burning draft cards became a symbolic protest for thousands who opposed the war, enough so that Congress enacted a law expanding violations for such acts. The issue went all the way to the Supreme Court, where defenders argued it was protected free speech. They ultimately lost, as the court ruled that burning draft cards was unrelated to the First Amendment. But it wasn't just about opposing war for some. It was about fighting for agency over their own future at a time when the government seemed determined to decide it for them, just like their parents had wanted to do. I Feel Like I'm Fixin' to Die Rag by Country Joe and the Fish offered a sarcastic, biting critique of the Vietnam War.
It's 1, 2, 3. What are we fighting for? Don't ask me, I don't give a damn. The next stop is Vietnam.
Beat writers like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg had popularized a lifestyle rejecting mainstream conformity, inspiring youth to embrace freedom, creativity, and exploration, depicted in San Francisco. As music fueled their movement, the rise of psychedelics defined the emerging counterculture.
No time to wonder why we all gonna die.
Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters' Acid Test were a series of legendary psychedelic parties and events that became a cornerstone of this counterculture. Kesey, the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, along with his group of friends known as the Merry Pranksters, organized these happenings where psychedelics were freely distributed and experienced. The acid tests combined music, light shows, experimental art, and theatrical chaos to create immersive sensory experiences designed to expand consciousness. These events played a crucial role in popularizing psychedelics, influencing the cultural atmosphere that would culminate in the Summer of Love and the broader hippie movement. The Grateful Dead's cover of Viola Lee Blues became a centerpiece of their early live shows, often stretched into long improvisations at acid tests. Haight-Ashbury became a magnet for hippies, artists, and musicians attracted by affordable rents and a community that embraced free expression, communal living, and activism. A community action group called the Diggers opened a free store which offered discarded but usable items, free for the taking or giving. They were able to pick up crates of overflow from local grocery stores that would otherwise have been thrown away. The Diggers provided free service in the panhandle of Golden Gate Park every day at 4 o'clock, feeding people with a stew from donated meat and vegetables. Eventually, they also opened a free medical clinic with volunteers from UCSF Medical School. These services helped perpetuate the experiment of a communal existence. Psychedelic-themed shops and coffee houses were selling everything from beads to ponchos. The print mint was selling psychedelic posters, art prints, political broadsides, and rock concert compositions made for the Fillmore and Winterland halls. A commercial renaissance began flourishing. Spencer Dryden, drummer of Jefferson Airplane, said, "The Haight was heaven for anybody with long hair. About 800 dyed-in-the-wool hippies, and that's it. It was a family thing, no tourists. Everybody did live together and help each other out." But that small, tight-knit community would not last. Just as soon as the communal society began to blossom, the flower power narrative began to emerge. And with it, songs like White Rabbit captured the era's shift towards surreal, psychedelic visions that fueled the changing culture along with a coming darkness.
And here you go, chasing rabbits, and you know you're going to fall.
The Human Being, held in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park in January '67, was a landmark gathering that brought together thousands of young people united in rejecting mainstream society. Celebrating peace, love, and expanding consciousness, it became a powerful symbol of the burgeoning hippie movement, setting the tone for the Summer of Love by inspiring youth to embrace alternative lifestyles rooted in harmony, creativity, and social change. The rise of communes represented attempts to live outside of capitalist structures and traditional family models. The song San Francisco by Scott McKenzie may be the single most accurate depiction of the peaceful anti-war sentiment that was sweeping the nation.
Be sure to wear some flowers in your hair.
By spring '67, the largest migration of young people in American history began to descend on Haight-Ashbury, all in search of what the media would dub the Summer of Love. However, that would turn out to be only half the story. The Monterey Pop Festival, held in June '67 in Monterey, California, was a groundbreaking music event that marked a turning point in popular culture and the rise of the counterculture movement, bringing together legendary artists like Janis Joplin, who captivated in a shimmery two-piece suit with her breakout performance of Ball and Chain. This slow, emotionally charged blues piece enchanted the crowd with its raw vulnerability and solidified her status as an international rock star.
Tell me why does everything go wrong?
The Who performed My Generation and Pete Townshend's now legendary guitar-smashing antics, which helped cement their reputation as one of the wildest live acts of the era.
People try to put us down.
While the Mamas and Papas' California Dreamin' perfectly captured the sunny West Coast folk pop sound. Jimi Hendrix, during the finale of Wild Thing, theatrically doused the guitar in lighter fluid and set it ablaze. The festival showcased a new generation of rock, folk, and psychedelic music, It was one of the first major festivals to promote peace and love on a grand scale, drawing an enthusiastic crowd of worldwide attention. Monterey Pop helped launch the careers of several iconic performers and solidified California's reputation as the epicenter of the Summer of Love. While San Francisco drew national attention, Los Angeles had its own dynamic scene fueled by artists and musicians. Neighborhoods like Venice Beach and Laurel Canyon were gathering spots for like-minded people seeking freedom and experimentation. Laurel Canyon in particular nurtured a close-knit community of musicians such as the Byrds, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, The Doors, and Joni Mitchell, whose music helped define the era's soundtrack. Buffalo Springfield's For What It's Worth, inspired by the Sunset Strip curfew protest, was adopted as an anti-war anthem.
I think it's time we stop, children, watch that sound. Everybody look what's going down.
With Jim Morrison's magnetic presence at the forefront, along with its sultry organ riffs, The Doors' Light My Fire captured the intensity of 1967.
Girl, we couldn't get much higher.
Jim Morrison explains the hippie phenomenon.
There does seem to be a trend toward a return to a kind of primitive outlook on life, a more tribal attitude, and I think it's a natural reaction to industrialization, but unfortunately, I think it's kind of naive, because I think the future is going to become increasingly mechanized, computerized, as you call it, and I don't think there's any turning back. It's just figuring out a way to survive and thrive in that kind of society. I don't think there's any chance of going back. And look at it this way too. The hippie lifestyle is really a middle class phenomena, and it could not exist in any other society except ours, where there's such an incredible surfeit of goods, products, and leisure time. I think that's the reason for it, because the generations immediately preceding ours had world wars and depressions to contend with, and for the last 10 or 15 years in this country, it's there's time enough and there's money enough to live a kind of a flagrant, outrageous lifestyle, which was impossible before.
However, the movement wasn't just contained to the US. It spread across the Atlantic to Europe as well. England's take was mostly playful and creative in nature. Procol Harum's A Whiter Shade of Pale became the defining sound of the Summer of Love, its haunting organ and surreal lyrics perfectly capturing the dreamy psychedelic mood of 1967.
I was feeling kind of seasick.
Swinging London was the epicenter of groundbreaking music, with bands like the Beatles' hippie anthem All You Need Is Love and Pink Floyd's Interstellar Overdrive instrumental psychedelic jam that captured the experimental boundary pushing of the time. Carnaby Street and Kings Road became a hub of fashion innovation, where rich colors, miniskirts, and psychedelic styles became popular. Victorian and Edwardian influences appeared in high-necked blouses, lace trims, and fitted jackets. Their creative take on the scene contrasted America's sometimes seriousness. While many were against the Vietnam War, they were not under immediate threat of being drafted into it. The art scene thrived with pop artists like Peter Blake and David Hockney challenging traditional norms, while underground clubs and happenings filled nightly. Swinging London embodied the same spirit of breaking away from convention, embracing freedom and shaping the culture. Donovan's There Is a Mountain captured that playful, unconventional spirit, turning everyday observations into whimsical, culture-shaping art.
The caterpillar sheds its skin to find the butterfly within.
The summer of '67 throughout the West captured the imagination of a generation eager to explore new possibilities and rewrite the rules of society. It was that sense of belonging, paired with the incredible music as its backdrop, that made the movement irresistible to many. The Young Rascals' groovin', carefree lyrics depict the easygoing feeling everyone was in search of.
I can't imagine anything that's better. The world is ours whenever we're.
But like any movement or organization, it wasn't immune to bad actors. What many failed to recognize was that human beings are inherently flawed. Some learn to master their dark impulses, while others let those impulses master them, destroying their own lives and harming those who are caught in the crosshairs. The top songs of '67 reflected a similar contrast with Lulu's To Sir With Love, a melodic and reflective emotional song compared to the Box Tops' The Letter with a grittier and raw sense of urgency.
Give me a ticket for an aeroplane. Ain't got time to take a fast train.
Media headlines often romanticize the summer of love, but behind the scenes, a darkness emerged that is often forgotten. In Haight-Ashbury, runaways and social misfits began sharing crash pads. Streets became filled with new arrivals day and night. The influx of people quickly began to take its toll on the community. There was not enough housing and food to supply everyone. Resources were quickly depleted. Chronic hunger was becoming a common thing while crime was on the rise. People had nowhere to stay. As many as 15 or 20 would live in one apartment with no hot water. They ate dirty food on dirty plates and slept on dirty mattresses on filthy floors. The rooms were full of lice. STDs were rampant. Some of the places they lived in, you'd vomit when you walked into them, commented the police captain. As most people came with good intentions, others used it as a way to take advantage of the naivete of the young and unsuspecting. Bad seeds emerged within the movement. Teenage girls were often preyed upon. Soon, violent crimes began to get out of control. Coming to Haight-Ashbury often meant going hungry or panhandling. They were popping pills and being used in the name of free love. Some experienced bad trips and bad times. The locals became increasingly disillusioned and frustrated. This was a mecca for nearly every runaway kid in America. The FBI reports the arrest of over 90,000 juvenile runaways. Most of them flee well-off middle-class homes, getting picked up by the thousands. Police Chief Thomas Cahill stated publicly, "Hippies are no asset to the community. These people do not have the courage to face the reality of life. They are trying to escape. Nobody should let their young children take part in this hippie thing." The dark side was often glossed over by the national media, but the reality became an eye-opener for anyone who arrived expecting utopia. Wide-eyed teens and young adults arrived expecting a city filled with the scent of patchouli, streets alive with jangling guitars, and voices singing about peace and love, an image that may once have been true. But the reality quickly turned bleak as so many showed up without the resources to sustain themselves. Amid the contrast between the expectation and reality, songs like Incense and Peppermints captured the swirling psychedelic energy of the scene. Its trippy melodies reflect both the promise and the chaotic, often overwhelming reality.
Who cares what games we choose? Little to win, but nothing to lose.
American parents in 1967 watched with a mix of fear, confusion, and frustration as their children embraced the summer of love's counterculture, a world that seemed to reject everything they had fought so hard to build. But now they saw their sons and daughters abandoning conventional life, challenging authority, and championing ideals that felt reckless and even dangerous. To many, the idealism of the youth looked like chaos, a nonsensical world threatening to unravel the very fabric of American life and the promise of the American dream they had long believed in. Meanwhile, British parents were not as freaked out and saw it as a temporary form of expression. However, the authorities took it very seriously, as rock musicians gained more societal pull than those with the important titles. In '67, Mick Jagger and Keith Richards were arrested at Richards' home in Sussex for possession during a well-planned-out bust. Ruby Tuesday is a more reflective, bittersweet side of the era, capturing themes of fleeting freedom and the price of living on the edge.
Ruby Tuesday, who could hang a name on you? When
During this time, Syd Barrett of Pink Floyd became increasingly erratic, partly due to his heavy use of psychedelics, which would lead him to missing gigs, becoming incoherent, and eventually leaving the band. Arnold Layne captured his whimsical style, reflecting both his genius and a return to childhood prominent at the time. As the Haight-Ashbury neighborhood swelled with hippies and psychedelic use skyrocketed, police conducted multiple raids. These busts were part of a broader attempt to curb the use of hallucinogens, which were seen as dangerous and subversive. The Grateful Dead struck a defiant tone to the San Francisco press after 2 of their members were arrested in Haight-Ashbury in 1967 with over a pound of marijuana. 11 residents of 710 Ashbury Street, including Bob Weir and Pigpen, 2 managers, and several women living with the band, were handcuffed together and hauled away by police. While the Summer of Love is often remembered as a golden moment of peace, music, and unity, the reality on the ground was far more complicated. Haight-Ashbury became overcrowded almost overnight, with tens of thousands of young people, many runaways, arriving without money or a plan. The neighborhood's infrastructure buckled under the strain, leading to a rise in homelessness, unsanitary conditions, and outbreaks of disease. Unregulated drugs fueled overdoses, psychotic breaks, and bad trips that landed people in emergency rooms. Predators exploited the vulnerable teens, crime rates climbed, and the once open, trusting atmosphere began to erode. Police crackdowns grew more frequent, while the commercialization and media hype turned the counterculture into a tourist attraction. By the end of the summer, disillusionment had set in for many, revealing a hard truth. Even moments built on peace and love are not immune to the darker impulses of human nature.
Strange brew, do what's inside of you.
Ken Kesey's bus became the moving stage for his acid tests. When members wandered off during stops, he coined the phrase, "You're either on the bus or off the bus," both literally and figuratively. Tom Wolfe's book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, popularized it, turning it into a counterculture slogan. On the bus meant fully embracing the experiment and its unpredictability. Off the bus meant you weren't part of it, you didn't get it, or didn't fit in with the freewheeling ethos. And here's why it's so mythologized. At its core, the Summer of Love came from a place of love and freedom. That's what sets it apart from movements today, which often emerge from resentment and hostility. If you want to find something that truly stands the test of time, look at the spirit behind it. The Beatles are a great example of this. Most of their music came from a place of optimism, even when they pushed boundaries and experimented with tension. They made you think, yes, but anger and despair, never. You can't stay trapped in that mindset too long. It destroys you from the inside out. Over time, many who once embraced a communal hippie existence began to dissociate from it. Not from mainstream society this time, but from the collective itself, in search of their own individual existence. The Summer of Love was a turning point in history because it opened society up in ways never before thought possible. We became a much more open society. Lifestyles became acceptable that were once taboo. And most importantly, we are much more likely to question the status quo. Something once very rare is now celebrated. In 1959, Carl Jung offered an explanation as to why collectivism fails over time.
You know, man doesn't stand forever his nullification. Once there will be a reaction. And I see it setting in. You know, when I think of my patients, they all seek their own existence and to assure their existence against that complete atomization into nothingness or into meaninglessness. Man cannot stand a meaningless life.
Today, nearly 60% of young adults report that they lack meaning or purpose in their lives, according to a Harvard study in 2023, and they were negatively impacted by not knowing what to do with my life, citing financial and relationship worries and a perception that the world was unraveling. It's an indictment of a culture built on consumerism, endless work weeks, and negativity. It's a bleak worldview, especially when compared to previous generations when young adulthood often brimmed with hope and the possibility of what the future might hold. And even if it didn't last, for that brief moment, the Summer of Love gave an entire generation something priceless: hope. But without safety and resources, you're back where you started, but just in a new place. What really set this moment apart was the connection people experienced. That culture of community is one of the reasons this period remains so fascinating. There was an optimism to the entire era that seems to have been lost. Never before or since have so many artists expressed such a widespread feeling of possibility. Perhaps that's why the music felt transcendent. It carried a vision of what the world could be. That's the kind of vision worth aiming for today, just not blindly or naively. Until then, we have the music and the stories to serve as a reminder. Or as someone once wrote, when you get down to it, everybody's soul is just waiting for the right song.